Good evening. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We have a action-packed evening of lots of knowledge and skills that we're excited to share with you. We have an excellent panel of ice fishermen and ice anglers. I guess that's a term that reside here in Iowa that are part of our panel tonight. We're really excited to have you tuning in from home or wherever you may be. My name is Jamie Cook. I serve as the state coordinator with Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. I get an awesome opportunity to work alongside Iowa DNR with a lot of the recruitment and retention activities, which I'll speak about in just a minute. Before we get going, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items for you. Things are a little different tonight. There's over 400 of you all tuning in from wherever you're sitting right now. This is an all-time record for our programs. It beats all of our hunting programs that we offered online last fall, hands down. We're really excited about this ice fishing class tonight and next Tuesday night for our advanced session. So if you are tuning in tonight, we're going to be covering the basics. We're going to be probably steering clear from some more advanced questions and more advanced species. So if you start tuning in and you're kind of wondering, man, this isn't really what I signed up for, make sure that you're signed up for our class next week. But we know that you're going to have a good time enjoying the conversation. To make that happen, we have a dedicated group of panelists with us tonight. I'll want to start out by making some basic introductions. If they want to go ahead and activate their videos, I'm just going to ask them to wave to the camera when I introduce them. First off tonight, we have Barb Geiger. She is our aquatic education coordinator here with our Iowa DNR. She operates out of Des Moines and statewide. She'll be sharing with us tonight. We have Tyler Stubbs, one of our, Tyler, I can't describe you, man. You've just got your own, just Tyler Stubbs. You're the Tyler Stubbs. How about that? But he's with our fisheries division. He's our urban fisheries coordinator, and he'll be chiming in tonight as well. We have Amber Pyatt. She is in one of our AmeriCorps positions with the Iowa DNR. She is part of our First Catch Center and takes care of that website, all about fishing basics to get people introduced to the outdoors. So welcome, Amber. We also have Scott Grummer with us tonight. He is also with our fisheries division. He'll be chiming in. We have one of our conservation officers, Pat Jorgensen. Pat's joining us tonight. He'll be covering our regulations. And we have Dale Garner. Dale is one of our past employees with the Iowa DNR and our very, one of our more passionate ice fishermen we wanted to have come back and join us. Also tonight, you can't see them if we have Nicole Coney and Megan Weisskopf. They're going to be running our tech side of things. So if you have questions and comments that come up or any issues, there'll be some of those ones taking the screen to make sure that you are getting what you need out of our program here tonight. Before we get going, I want to go back to those housekeeping items I kind of went right over. At the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a window or a box that says Q&A. We want that to be the main way that you submit any questions tonight. That is, if you're the first 100 people that made it in the door through Zoom. Some of you may just now be tuning in via YouTube. And so we'll ask for you all, if you haven't set up an account in YouTube or have your own channel, you can email questions as they come up. Nicole. Her email address is Nicole, NICOLE.CONEY at dnr.iowa.gov. If you end up on that link tonight, that's also in your email that you received yesterday from me, and then a reminder, I believe, today from Megan. So if you're tuning in from YouTube and you want a question answered, just shoot it over to Nicole. That should be in your email inbox. Well, why do we do this? Why have we gathered here tonight, over 400 of us, to talk about ice fishing? And I think from our perspective, it's Iowa DNR and NGOs like Pheasants Forever and other groups, we want to see people outside. If you're like myself, you spend a big part of your time back in the spring when everything shut down. You tried to get outside and enjoy nature. You took advantage of many of our city parks and community parks and county parks. It's all about getting folks outside. At the end of the day, though, there's been an overall decline, especially with hunting. There's been slight declines in fishing over the years, but we just want people to get out and enjoy the outdoors because there are funds that you participate in as a license purchaser that helps the agency like Iowa DNR do the research and management of our fish and wildlife population. So as fish and anglers, as fishermen, anglers, hunters begin to go on the decline, those license dollars remain at risk. We want to make sure that we're trying to bring new people into the outdoors, hunting and shooting sports and fishing. So with that said, again, remember the Q&A feature down at the bottom if you're joining us by Zoom. If you're on YouTube, make sure that you email your questions to nicole.coney@dnr.iowa.gov, and her information is in your inbox. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Barb Geiger. Barb?
Thanks, Jamie. And actually, my title is coordinator, which, so what I did was I tried to pull really good people together to help us out. And so most of what I'm going to be doing tonight is behind the scenes. And Jamie already mentioned that we're going to cover the real basics. So if you've never ice fished, we're going to show you the basic things that you need to know: how to be safe, how to be legal, and the most basic equipment to get out there and fish some of our smaller waters. So we're going to keep it pretty simple, and then we'll do more next week. I'm going to try to share my screen now. We'll see if that works for us. And throughout I will be sharing the PowerPoint. And as soon as we can get it up, and it should be full screen, so y'all should be able to see it. And we're going to, we want to mention that this is being done in conjunction with the First Catch Center, which is being funded with a grant from the Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation in conjunction with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. And we were going to do a lot of things last year. We haven't done that, so we're going to start again in 2020 or 2021. Let's not go back to 2020. So pretty much ice fishing is essentially going out when the water's frozen and fishing through the ice. It is different than regular fishing, and we'll go through some of that when we talk about the different tactics that are we're going to be doing tonight, because fish move a lot slower. They are cold-blooded, so they're going really slow this time of year, but there are a lot of similarities. We're going to talk a little bit about panfish and pretty much think small, but think smaller and slower. And we're going to talk about making sure that you're going to enjoy your experience outdoors, especially for beginners. If you already spend a lot of time outdoors, you know how to dress, but you might want to think a little bit more about your footwear, because that's one of the things about keeping your feet warm on the ice. But if you don't spend a ton of time outdoors, we want to make sure that you're prepared so that you can be safe and comfortable. Okay, and I'm going to turn it over to Pat Jorgensen now, and he's going to talk about safety.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Great to see so many people interested in our basic ice fishing webinar. I was asked to come on here as a conservation officer to talk first about some basic ice fishing safety, and then I'm going to talk to you about some of the regulations. So when it comes to ice fishing, probably ice thickness, ice quality is probably the main thing or the main concern. We want to make sure that you're being cautious and going out on these lakes and ponds and making sure that you have good quality ice. And so some of the things we want you to do is we always want you to check the ice as you go out. We want you to double check as you go out onto the ice, checking that thickness and the quality. And no ice is ever 100% safe. I can't stress that enough. No ice is 100% safe. We don't want you, as a good friend of mine just said the other day when we were preparing for this, we don't want you to be afraid to go out on the ice, but we also want you to be cautious on going out on the ice and know some things through experience. And bringing an ice fishing partner with you is pretty critical. I do see a lot of folks out there that are fishing by themselves, and that's fine. But as far as the safety aspect, if you can fish with a partner, in case something happens, you have somebody there to help you or call for help, or fish in a group setting. So let's get back to some of the ice thicknesses. We have a chart here that you can see, and it is a recommended minimum ice thicknesses put out by the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. It's guidelines for new or clear ice. So what I mean by that is new ice is typically a good blue color or clear ice, or it doesn't have any like honeycomb to it, or it hasn't been ice that's been refrozen. You'll see that a lot of times on lakes. Just recently, not too long ago, we had, with our new ice that we had a warm up and we had slush on top with the additional snow that we got in some parts of the state. And so when you get snow on top of the ice, that can cause a slushy situation, and then that freezes over. And so you might have only 2 or 3 inches of good blue ice underneath some rotten honeycomb ice. So you got to be really careful and look at the ice color. Darker, thinner, or weaker ice, if it's dark, especially when you get towards the end of the ice fishing season, when things start to warm up, that ice on these lakes and ponds will turn a really dark color, and you want to stay away from those areas. Again, snow covered areas with some of the recent snow that we've got, that not only covers up the ice, but it also insulates the ice, and that can become dangerous. And so it also will add weight to the ice. And when you drill a hole, as I did last week on a lake, I drilled a hole, and then the water will bubble up through that hole because the weight of the snow is pushing down on the ice. So you got to be careful with that. Immersed objects or things that are sticking out. Some of our lakes in Iowa, some of our man-made lakes have flooded timber in them. And so if you got a lake that you're going to fish, or a farm pond that has trees that are sticking up normally out of the water, some of those areas will attract the sun rays during a nice warm day like it was today, and that can create a thinner ice structure around those areas. So if you're walking in and around where there's sticks or structure, just be careful of those areas, test them. I didn't really talk about how you can test. You can test by using a spud bar, which is a long piece of a rod of metal that you can poke onto the ice as you're going out, kind of like a walking stick, and you can test the ice going out. And if that ice rod goes through the ice, of course, you know that the ice is too thin and that you need to turn around and go back. If all you have is an auger, you can just drill holes every 10 feet or so as you're walking out, drill holes and check the ice thickness. Okay. But getting back to some of this structure, be careful walking around some of these flooded structures. I know other areas on some of our lakes, like up at Clear Lake, have submersed rock reefs. And sometimes those rock reefs are only 4 or 5 feet deep. And the sun can heat those rocks up even underneath the water and cause an unsafe situation around some of these rock reefs. So even around rocks, even along the shoreline, will deteriorate ice. So be careful of that. Frequently fished areas. As people start to get out on the ice and start drilling holes, you're going to learn about different hole sizes and different types of augers, but there could be anything from 4-inch holes to up to 8 to 10-inch holes. And as people drill those holes, that's surely going to weaken the ice. You got to be careful where you're at and avoid walking around those areas that are frequently fished or a lot of holes are being drilled. And then flowing water. A lot of our lakes have a constant stream or flow. Many of our natural lakes have a flow of water that's going through them. Some people like to fish the backwaters of some of our rivers, which will have constant moving water going through there. And that will also affect how thick the ice will get. It needs to get awfully cold when you have flowing water underneath the ice to get any good ice thickness in order to fish. So this chart that I talked about, you can see that it says that 2 inches or less we consider unsafe. 4 inches is about where we like to see it before any person goes out on the ice. Anywhere to 4 to 5 inches for a group. You get up to 5 inches, which is where we are and most of our lakes across the state right now, 5 to 7 inches of ice out there. That will support an ATV or a snowmobile. And again, this is clear ice, good ice that I'm talking about. And then, yes, people do drive cars and pickups. That is legal to do that on our lakes. However, 8 to 12 inches, my rule of thumb has always been at least 12 inches of good ice before you drive any type of motor vehicle, small pickup or a car. And then 12 to 15 inches, a medium sized truck, and anything above 15 inches, a larger truck you could drive on it. So there's your little chart there to give you an idea of ice thickness. Again, we don't want you to be afraid, but we also want you to be aware and use common sense when you're out there on the ice. So just remember some of those immersed objects, rocks that might be underneath the ice that could make it weak, and continue to check the ice thickness and the quality as you go out on the lake. Don't trust where anybody else has walked. That is one thing that I learned. It's crazy. About 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, when the ice was only 1 or 2 inches thick, we had people going out on there on some of these backwaters where I live. And that's a dangerous situation. So be careful around the ice. Go on to the next. Basic ice fishing safety. Let's talk about that. We want to preventing any emergencies. So we want to take all the safety precautions and bring necessary safety equipment along with us. Again, I already talked about hunting with a partner or a buddy or a group of folks. Tell someone where you're going. It's no different than when we teach hunter education. If you're going to be out hunting, if you're going to be out ice fishing, tell somebody where you're going, how long you plan to be gone, and when you may end up plan to come back. Because if you don't end up showing up, we're definitely going to send somebody out looking for you. Okay, so make sure that you're out there with somebody. Some of the necessary safety equipment is I would recommend bringing a first aid kit. You never know what you might need that for. If you cut yourself with an auger, augering in a hole, you get a hook in your finger, there could be anything. So first aid kit is something that you should bring. A PFD, a life jacket. I have a float coat here. This is my conservation officer float coat. It has some reflectors on it. That's nice for at night. If somebody gets lost, those will definitely shine if somebody's looking through a spotlight or with a helicopter or emergency vehicle. And this coat not only keeps me warm, but it has flotation devices in it. And so therefore, if I fall through the ice, I will float in this coat and stay warm for a little bit longer period of time. Something great to have. If you don't want something quite that bulky, I've even wore one of these inflatable life jackets. This is something that's not quite as bulky. These inflatable life jackets I wear in the boat, and they either self-inflate once you fall into the water, or some of them are manual where you have to pull this cord right here. It inflates a CO2 cartridge in here and it blows up around your neck just like a regular life jacket. So these are kind of nice to wear. Good idea to wear these when you're out there on the ice. And of course you can wear a regular life jacket too. Again, a spud bar, a ice chisel, Again, that's just a long rod, steel rod that you chop on the ice as you're walking out, checking the ice thickness. It's a good thing to have with you. It is also something that if you do fall through the ice and you have that spud bar with you, you could maybe put it across the hole that you fell in and use it to push yourself back up onto the ice. A throw jug and a rope, that's a great idea. I've seen people use jugs. I've seen people use 5-gallon buckets. Most ice fishermen that go, I always have a 5-gallon bucket, mostly to carry out my equipment, but then also I sit on it while I'm fishing. And so it serves a couple purposes. But about 2 years ago down at Lake Darling, I was out ice fishing and had a gentleman fall through the ice during late ice when the ice conditions were starting to get bad in certain areas. And he fell through the ice, and a couple of us, along with a couple other, myself, along with a couple other fishermen, were able to get to him with a rope tied to a 5-gallon bucket. And we threw that out to him and was able to pull him back up onto the ice and safely. So anything like that, I will normally, I'm issued an Iowa DNR throw bag. This is what we carry in our boats. This is a rope in a bag. And basically all I do is unsnap it here. I grab this end right here, hang on to it, and then I can throw this bag. And this bag has got all the rope in it, and it's heavy, and I can throw this a long distance. And so this is something I carry with me and keep in my my kit when I go ice fishing in case somebody falls through. And it's just a basic throw bag, okay? A cell phone, a radio, a two-way radio, maybe an FRS handheld walkie-talkies would be something good to have. But definitely, I think most people have cell phones today. Carry those with you, and you can get some help. Something I never go out on the ice without is a set of ice picks. This just goes around, basically around my neck. I can wear it. It's not real intrusive. It's not in the way. I can still fish. I can still wear my life jacket. These are used if I fall through. I can pull these apart. They just go together like this. They pull apart, and you can see they've got two little spikes on them. This give you a chance to dig the ice while kicking your feet as hard as you can to get back up onto the ice safely. Okay, and that's one thing. If you do fall on the ice or fall through the ice, you want to remain calm. Okay. Of course, you know what's going to happen first. You're going to have that ultimate shock of falling into that cold water. You're probably going to take a deep breath. Hopefully, you don't get a lot of water in your mouth. I've done this in training exercises where we were required to jump in the water. It is a shock to your system, but you want to remain calm. Know that your main object is to get out of the water, and then use these ice picks to dig out. I've seen people also use keys. They get their keys out of their pocket and have used keys. You can carry boards with nails driven through them, kind of in a safety kit to take along, and use those nails to get yourself up out of there. So extra clothes. If you do fall through, once you get out, you're going to want to get your wet clothes off right away. Because hypothermia is something that could set in pretty quickly. And hypothermia is when your body temperature begins to drop to a dangerous level. And so these are all safety equipment items that I think that are basic needs if you're going to be out there ice fishing. Go on to the next. Again, some more basic ice fishing safety, preventing emergencies, dress for success in layers. So under layers wick away perspiration from the skin surface and keeps the warm air trapped in. So long underwear, there's all different kinds of products out there on the market right now. We still teach in hunter education that wool is the number one material to wick away moisture and keep you warm, but there's a lot of other Under Armour type under layers. There's under layers, there's mid layers for insulating, and then your outer layer. Just make sure that you're dressing in layers, and make sure that they're not real tight. Of course, your under layer is probably maybe going to be a little tight, but then dress each one of those layers loosely so that air can circulate between those layers and create a warm little blanket there for you. So one thing I like to wear when I'm ice fishing that keeps me warm is the first thing that goes is my feet. I get cold feet, and when you're drilling holes, you're going to get water splashed all over your feet. So I like to wear rubber boots or any type of water repellent boot, any type of Gore-Tex boots. But instead of wearing leather boots, I'll wear rubber boots. And then that way my feet stay warm. A good insulated rubber boot is something that you would be probably a must. You'll also want some type of a hat, cap. If you're going to be fishing outside and not inside of an ice shelter or an ice shack, you'll probably want some type of a face mask to keep your face warm. And then your hands, you're going to want some type of gloves to have on your hands. So your hands, your feet, your face, and your head are the first things that are going to get cold. So make sure you don't, chintz out on the good quality clothing when you're going to go out there. You might want to take extra gloves with you. A lot of times I've gone out and drilling holes. I'm cleaning the holes out of slush because your holes are going to have slush in it from drilling the holes. You get your gloves wet. If it's really cold out, let's say 0 degrees out, those things are going to freeze instantly. Then for the way back, you're going to have wet, frozen gloves. So you might want to bring an extra pair of gloves in case those get wet for your trip back. Okay, next. Potential emergencies for falling through the ice. Again, I already kind of touched on this, but let's go over it again because it's very important. You want to remain calm. You're going to want to use your spikes if you have them. You're going to want to kick your legs as best as you can and pull your torso up and onto the ice again. And then once you're up on the ice, you kind of want to do a barrel roll and roll yourself away from the hole that you fell through. And then you'll want to get dry and warm as soon as possible. Okay, get into those clothes. If you have a blanket or somebody has a blanket, get wrapped up in that blanket. Depending on how long you've been in that water, if emergency personnel is on its way, or if not, you want your friends to get call 911 and get emergency personnel there right away. And then if they can cover you up and keep you in a blanket the best you can until emergency personnel can get there and get you treated. Okay, so get dry and warm and get help as soon as possible. Hypothermia is when the body temperature drops to a dangerous level. And once hypothermia and your body temperature drops down, you'll start to go, probably the first symptom is a little bit of uncontrolled shivering. You're going to feel cold. Hypothermia after a while, and the next stage, you may lose consciousness or you may not be aware of your surroundings. You're going to possibly black out or pass out. So hypothermia can set in really quickly. And it doesn't really need to be that cold for hypothermia to set in. Like again, comparing it to hunter education, hunter safety, if you're out there hunting in temperatures, even in 60-degree weather, but if it's damp and rainy or wet, hypothermia can set in. So make sure that you, again, get dry clothes on and get wrapped up in a blanket. Frostbite, of course, that's localized freezing of the tissues. Usually is going to happen on your feet or your fingers first. Your fingers are going to turn numb, and then you're not going to be able to feel them after a while. They're going to be hard. They're going to be kind of stiff. The best thing you can do is rub your hands together, get them into some gloves. If your gloves are wet, I always like to kind of just put them inside my coat get them up close to my body or in the pockets down by my thighs, somewhere up against my own skin where my hands are going to stay nice and warm. I do that a lot of times when I'm bow hunting for deer. When I'm cold, I'll just put my hands inside my pockets and get it close to my body, and then my hands will stay a lot warmer than actually when I have them in a glove. So be aware of frostbite. Ears, keep your ears covered up, especially if you're ice fishing in an area where it's going to be windy. If you're out on a lake, the wind, just like when you're boating in the summertime, you get that wind burn. It's going to be colder than it is on land. Your nose, your cheeks, your ears are all going to freeze and possibly get frostbite. So make sure that you get that treated right away and get your limbs warmed up as soon as possible. Okay, move on to the next. So that's really the basics of ice fishing safety. I probably didn't cover everything that's possible for safety-ness out there, but a lot of that will just come with common sense and knowledge as you become more of an avid ice fisherman, okay, and spending time outdoors. Some of the basic things, if anybody's been sledding or ice skating or just spending time out in the snow and out in the outdoors, when you bundle up, all those apply to ice fishing. So just be careful out there. Let's talk a little bit about some of the regulations. This is a regulations booklet that I had picked up that I have. Of course, I'm a conservation officer, so I have a lot of these in my pickup. And these can all be picked up at any of the license vendors where you can buy a license. And so with that being said, let's talk about a fishing license. A fishing license is required for anybody that is going to be fishing that is age 16 or older. So anybody under the age of 16 can fish without a license and have their own limit, except for when they're trout fishing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the trout regulations here in just a little bit. So why do you need a license? Well, you need a license because that money that you pay for the license helps our department, the Department of Natural Resources, and our fisheries biologists stock fish in some of our lakes and manage the lakes so that you guys can have good fishing. And we do have really good fishing here in Iowa. Our biologists do a great job out there monitoring our lakes and rivers. They do a lot of studies. They do a lot of stocking. And so your license money helps fund those activities. And if you didn't buy a license, then you're not contributing to the cause. And we want to make sure that we have good fishing and good places to fish in the state of Iowa for future generations. So a basic license, an annual license for someone that's 16 years of age or older is $22. And that's for the entire year. And we do have other licenses that you can buy if you just want to buy a 7-day license. We have a 1-day license, a 3-day license, and we even have a 3-year license. So we have a lot of different license options that are all shown in the regulations booklet here. So when you're talking about trout fishing, a lot of our urban ponds, a lot of our urban lakes are stocked by our fisheries employees. And a lot of people enjoy fishing for trout, not only in open water, but we do stock some of our urban ponds and lakes during the ice fishing season. And that is a very popular amongst people. If you're going to be trout fishing in any of these urban ponds that are stocked, you will have to, if you're 16 and older, have an additional license, which we call a trout fee. And the trout fee is something that you'll have to pay for. I believe the trout fee is $14.50 if you want to fish for trout. So any of these areas that are stocked with trout during the ice fishing season, you will have to have a trout, pay the trout fee. One common question I get is, what about kids under the age of 16? Well, when it comes to trout fishing, you do not need a trout to pay the trout fee. But in order to keep fish, those fish would go under the limit of the adult who has that trout license. If that person under the age of 16 would like to have their own limit of trout, then they would have to pay the trout fee. So you need to be aware of some of the different regulations when it comes to fishing for trout. It's not that complicated, but you do need to know what those regulations are. Let's get into some of the basic regulations that come to that pertain to ice fishing. Besides having a license, some of the things on here on page 6 in the regulations booklet talks about hooks and lines. And so when you're fishing by hook and line, you cannot use more than 2 lines or more than 2 hooks on each line when still fishing or trolling. So basically you can have 2 poles, no more than 2 poles with 2 hooks on each one. Okay. I usually just fish with 1 pole, but if I do fish with 2 poles, usually just have 1 hook on each pole, but you can have up to 2 hooks on each pole. Talking about additional licenses, we do have option for persons who want to fish with a 3rd fishing pole, and you can buy a 3rd fishing pole permit, and that's an additional $14, would allow you to fish with 3 fishing poles. Okay. So when it comes to tip-up fishing, you're going to learn here a little bit later what a tip-up device is, but you can fish with a combination of 1 tip-up device and 1 fishing pole, or 2 tip-up fishing, 2 tip-ups and no additional lines. But if you have the additional 3rd line permit, then you can have an additional line or a tip-up. So tip-ups are a little bit different than a fishing pole. And our experts here are going to tell you the differences on that here in just a little bit. There are special regulations when it comes to tip-ups when you are fishing the Mississippi River or the Missouri or the Big Sioux. And so please read the regulations when it comes to using tip-ups on those bodies of water. There's a little bit of different regulations on how many tip-ups and things that you can have. And you cannot set any tip-ups within 300 feet of any dam or spillway on any of those parts of those rivers. So be aware of the tip-up regulations. Moving on here real quick, ice fishing shelters. Some people opt to fish out of an ice fishing shelter, and some of our lakes are natural lakes up in the northern part of the state, where people will leave ice shelters, we call them permanent ice shelters on the lake, unattended overnight. There's different regulations. A lot of people fish with portable ice fishing. They're a smaller, lighter. They pull them out there, they fish with them during the day, and then pull them back and take them home with you. So that's a little bit different. But ice fishing shelters that are left unattended on land or water under the jurisdiction of the state must have the owner's name, street address, and city in 4-inch or larger block letters in a color contrasting to their background on all sides of that ice shelter. But they do not need to register the ice shelter. Now, there are some states that require you to register an ice shelter if you're going to fish on that lake. I believe Minnesota requires a registration for even a portable ice shelter. So make sure you check the regulations in other states. When it comes to ice shelters left on lakes in Iowa, they must also have an attached reflector to all sides of any shelter that's left on the ice after sundown. So make sure that you have good reflectors on all 4 sides or all sides of that shelter. That is a regulation that is that requires you to do that. When shelters are being used, they have to remain unlocked. In the event that a conservation officer knocks on your door and wants to check your license or your bag limit, they have to be unlocked when they are being used. And then here's a big one. If you're going to have a permanent shelter on the lake, they must be removed by February 20th of each year, or before ice melt, of course, and whichever comes first. And then there are times when that date or deadline is extended, and then the Department of Natural Resources will make a notification to the public on that extension. That doesn't happen very often, So just remember February 20th or before ice melt is when you're required to remove those permanent ice houses off of the lake and off of any access points. They have to be completely removed. So that's a big one. I think that is about all I've got on ice fishing. I think I covered that. We talked about licenses, a little bit about ethics. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about ethics and angler etiquette. Of course, littering is illegal, but every year I see people that are leaving bait containers, alcohol, pop containers, things like that out on the ice. They're even making fires on the ice with wood, cigarette butts, all different kinds of things. So littering is against the law. We do not want to be doing that. We don't do that in open water. We don't want to do that on the ice. It just leaves a mess. So be aware of littering and carry out whatever you carry in as far as your garbage and keep the lakes looking nice and clean. Some other things is respect other fishermen. Sometimes when the fishing is hot and you're on the hot spot, people tend to crowd in, drilling holes right next to somebody else's ice house or right next to somebody isn't always good etiquette. Be respectful of other people and stay far away, or communicate with those folks and ask them if it's okay to drill next to them. That would be the best etiquette. When it comes to even walking next to people, try to swing out around people because making noise on top of the ice can scare fish away from their location where they're fishing. Also, driving on the ice, you are allowed to operate motor vehicles. Again, I talked about ice thickness when it comes to driving an automobile or an ATV. You need to drive in a reasonable speed. If you drive too fast, the ice can flex and can crack or break. And so be careful of driving too fast or driving by a group of people. Just be respectful of that. The last thing is wanton waste. Just the other day, I was checking fishermen. I went to a location where there had been some fishermen, and there on the ice was a bunch of small bluegills that they just caught and threw on the ice. But they were too small to clean, and they decided they didn't want to throw them back into the lake. So this is something I see quite often, and it's frustrating. So if you're not going to keep the fish, let's put them back in the lake where they belong, not on the ice where they can lay there to rot. That is a violation of wanton waste law. If you're going to catch fish and keep them, you need to take them home. So I think that's all I've got for my regulations. If I think of something later that I missed, I'll be happy to pipe in and then answer any questions that anybody might have. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the program.
Okay, Jamie's going to answer a question for us that we've had a lot of questions about some license things, and Jamie's just going to take it live. Plus, we've put some things in the chat that has links to what our current licenses are. And after Jamie's done, we're going to switch over to Tyler.
Thanks, Barb. We are, so there was a question that come in about lifetime licenses. Some states do offer these. I know they've offered them historically. We're not hearing anything right now with Iowa DNR doing that or moving that in that direction. But there is a license for folks that are 65 and older. You can check out more information on our website about that. Some states do have senior licenses either at a discount rate or free. You'll just need to check out our website for more information on that. Actually, I think, Barb, what we're going to do, we're getting fairly close to 7 o'clock. We're going to give everyone just about 4 or 5 minutes to take a break for our panelists to kind of rearrange and get everything rolling. And we'll come back here at, let's say, 6:53. we'll get going and we'll start with Tyler and essentially gear and tactics discussion that will guide us for the next hour. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. In the meantime, be watching for some polls to pop on your screen. For those that are on Zoom, we'd love for you to participate by answering those questions. It gives us a chance to kind of interact with you all a little bit. Keep the questions coming. Lots of good discussions going on behind the scenes tonight. Thanks, everybody. We'll come back at 6:53. Well, good evening again. Thank you all for allowing some of our panelists and instructors a quick 5-minute breaks. We're excited to have everybody back. We're looking really forward to the upcoming information. If you're like me, you may know very little about ice fishing. Your expertise may have only come from watching the movies Grumpy Old Men and Grumpier Old Men back in the 90s. That's been my extent when it comes to ice fishing. So tonight we've got several that are going to begin chiming in with us. And starting us off tonight will be Tyler Stubbs. Tyler, as you hop on here, buddy, let me ask you a quick question. You spent some time in the South. We don't ice fish in the South, where I grew up as well. So coming up here, what has got you into ice fishing? And growing up, maybe, I know you grew up around the Fort Dodge area. What was ice fishing like, and why do you continue to do it?
Yeah, that's a good question. They typically don't ice fish a whole lot in Mississippi. I know Kentucky, it's probably not a big thing there either. They did get snow in Mississippi this week, so I guess that's a start. But no, when I was growing up, we ice fished a lot. I mean, that's the coolest thing about fishing, in my opinion, is it's something you can do 12 months out of the year. You can do it all year round. There's really nothing stopping you. And you can't say that about a whole lot of other sports or activities or whatever. But when I moved back up here a few years ago and started getting back into ice fishing, you get out on the ice and there's kind of some camaraderie there with a lot of the other anglers. On some weekends, you'll see people, kids throwing a football around. And when you head even further north, in the Dakotas and Minnesota, you'll see, really nice permanent ice shelters. There'll be TVs and heaters and satellite and PlayStations and all that kind of stuff out there as well. So there's a lot of variation in fishing, but some of the best times I've had fishing has just been sitting out on the ice on a bucket and, with my dad or grandpa or I've started to take my daughters out now. So that's one of the coolest things about ice fishing is you can get out. And, I have always said I'm not currently a boat owner. And so this is the time of year. If you're not a boat owner, this is your time of year to shine. When you're casting from the bank at that log that's just out of reach, or that rock pile that you see people anchored up on all year round while you're fishing off the bank, now is your time to get out there and sit up right on top of that structure and hopefully catch a few fish. And so what I'm going to go over here just real quick, and if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A, is, one, how do we find the fish? And I think I got a slide coming up here. There we go. Time of day, a little bit about the time of day to catch fish. And then I'll briefly go through some of the more common species. I'll probably walk through, the bluegill, bass, and crappie, and rainbow trout. We've had a lot of rainbow trout questions come through. And then I'll ask Scott Grummer to come on. He's the district biologist over the Clear Lake area. And he can probably talk more about species like walleye, yellow bass, yellow perch. I saw in the poll there, the natural lakes dominated, I believe, the last I saw. So I know a lot of you are planning to go out, on the Iowa Great Lakes or Clear Lake or Lake View, somewhere in that area. So I want to make sure that we cover those species that are going to be more common to you up there as well. And then later on in the presentation, we've got a slide. It'll be basic tactics, and we'll walk through a few more baits and how to drill a hole and all that kind of stuff. But typically, the time of day is going to be the exact same as fishing in the summer or the spring. It's those twilight hours of dusk and dawn. And so if you can focus your fishing effort around, that early morning to mid-morning hours, late evening to dark, you have a good chance of being successful. It's very similar to what you'll see, during the spring or summer months. And so not a whole lot of change there. As far as getting out on the ice, a few things to think about. During the winter, the warmer water is actually at the bottom. And so it's not up at the top. And so you're going to find fish generally hugging that bottom. If you were to have a depth finder or some sort of electronics out there, and you'll see fish. They'll always be, for the most part, that 1 to 2, 3 feet right off the bottom. And so that's usually where I start. In an urban pond or a farm pond, I'll go out, I'll drill test holes on my way out or use my spud bar, making sure that the ice is good all the way out. Because as Pat mentioned, the ice is not uniform. No ice is 100% safe. And so make sure you're paying attention and doing that. But I typically make my way out to the middle in those smaller ponds, because that's usually where the deeper water is going to be. And I kind of start there, and then I can work my way back towards the shoreline if I'm not catching fish. Again, the nice thing about ice fishing, you're mobile. You can move, and you can move all around the surface area of that pond. And so, picking your depths, fish closer to the bottom, and then first try out in some of your deeper water. As far as ponds go, we don't have many of the urban ponds, especially, we don't have those mapped depth-wise. However, a lot of our larger lakes and smaller impoundments, we have those mapped. And so on the DNR Fishing Atlas or on the DNR Fishing page, there's a lake depth map page, and you can pick out which lake you're planning to fish and have a pretty good idea of where you're at to see what the depths are going to be. So that should give you a kind of a heads up on, I might need to go fish this certain section first because there's a lot more deeper water here. Some of the common species that we see, of course, in the majority of farm ponds or urban ponds here in Iowa, you're going to see largemouth bass, bluegill, and channel catfish. I have yet to catch a channel catfish through the ice. It's a goal of mine this year. I've made friends with some people that have figured that out, and I hope to cross it off my list this year. But catfish is one that I have never caught through the ice. Maybe Scott has, and maybe he'll give us a little secret if he has. But that has been something I have struggled with. So I'll just focus on bass and bluegill and crappie because I have caught those. Use one thing with ice fishing is you got to go small. And I'll just throw up here a little jig. It's my favorite color. And we can talk about this later as well. Hopefully you can see that. This is called Wonder Bread. And this is a tungsten jig, so it's a heavy jig. I think it's 4.5 millimeters. But this jig is one that I have used to catch all bass, bluegill, and crappie on. It's, for whatever reason, it's just been dynamite, and as well as gold jigs. As far as bluegills go, the smaller the better. I'm using 1 to 2 pound line, and again, fishing as deep as I can. I'm tipping this with a wax worm, and so that's a common bait. A wax worm is a very small, or a grub. So I'm not using a large night crawler or a red worm like you would during the summer. So again, you're getting that presentation much smaller. Same thing for crappies. Bass are going to be found in pretty similar habitats as bluegills. If you do have a pond that's got some vegetation in it, or has some vegetation in it, finding that weed line, you're typically going to find bass hanging out around there. And I like to use a variety of things for bass. You can catch them on those smaller jigs. You can use minnows. I have a hard time finding minnows a lot of times. So I've gone to using these spoons. And so this is a 4-edge minnow spoon. And hopefully you can see that there. So it's a 4-edge minnow spoon, or they make these rattle spoons. It's got a little rattler on the back. And so as you can see, it's a little larger bait than you would have for a crappie or a bluegill. I'm going to go ahead and ask Scott to come on and see if he wants to talk about some yellow bass and walleyes. Of course, yellow bass are a very popular fish that people target up in the Clear Lake area this time of year. Maybe you can give us a good fishing report from up there as well. Scott, are you available to come on?
Yeah, thanks, Tyler, and good evening, everyone. A little bit different species when you're dealing with a 4,000 acre lake versus a couple acre farm pond, but lot of similarities. For the yellow bass, all the pretty much same tackle that Tyler showed that would work for bluegill is going to work for the yellow bass. We also have yellow perch in the natural lakes, and they are biting really well now, especially Clear Lake and the Spirit Lake Okoboji chain. Again, similar tackle. Some people on Clear Lake are reporting, if you go with a little bit larger bait, you avoid some of the smaller perch that you would throw back anyway. But the other option is to just catch a lot of fish, and you sort through and keep the larger ones and let the smaller ones go. When you start to hit lakes that have some predator species, the slide that Tyler had up had largemouth bass. Up in the natural lakes here, we get into the walleye, occasionally northern pike. You sometimes have to start upsizing your gear a little bit. Obviously, a bluegill or yellow perch isn't going to be a fish that you're going to need to give drag or take line. But if you tie into one of those bigger predators, you need to fight that fish a little bit to be successful on getting it up on top of the ice. And Tyler talked about channel catfish, and I'll give him my trip technique and tip for channel catfish. Late ice season is definitely when you want to target channel catfish. I guarantee on a lake like Clear Lake, if you fish that tail end of the ice season as that ice is starting to melt, those catfish know that spring's nearby, and they start to get more active. And last winter, I was able to get about an 8-pound channel catfish through a 6-inch hole with bluegill and yellow bass tackle. So that type of fish is definitely a memorable fish to catch.
Well, I gotta say I'm jealous, Scott. That's a good point. Late ice there. I did have a request to potentially show up here a couple of those jigs again. One thing I forgot to mention. Here's a spoon. This is a 4-inch minnow. One thing I forgot to mention is rainbow trout, and so this is what I use also to fish for rainbow trout, especially if I'm pretty close to when they were stocked. And so those fish are very active once they're stocked, if you've ever been to the trout stockings. And so anything with a little bit of flash and flare to it, that's going to help you be successful with those trout. And so that's one of the main ones there. And then I'll throw up this Wonder Bread. Again, this is a secret weapon here, so don't go telling anybody. But there's the Wonder Bread jig. And I believe it's got maybe a size 10 or 12 hook on it, so it's very small. And there we go. All right. So now hopefully everybody can see it. So there's that one. And then the last one I'll show up there is one that's essentially a fly. I just dropped it on the floor. Essentially, it's a fly, and it's got a little gold head on it. So as you can see, I'm having to put this right up against the camera lens. So these are very small. I actually use these weights with this clamp on it here. My eyesight is not the best, and so I actually use this to hold the jig so I can tie it. So that may be a quick fact for you there. This is one easy way to hold onto that jig while you tie it. See, we had a few other questions come in. Are swivels too much to use for a delicate presentation? Yeah, I try to stay away from any swivels or snap swivels when I'm ice fishing. I want to keep it as small as possible. You're using, 1, 2, 3, 4-pound test line, so very thin line. And so that swivel is just one more added thing on there for those fish to see, especially if they're being finicky. And I have another question here. Is it recommended to bait those spoon hooks? You can do that. I've definitely tried to put wax worms on them before. But to be honest with you, I've personally had just better luck with this, just a regular spoon and kind of actively jigging that. I think you're really going for that flash and trying to get an active fish. So hopefully that answers your questions there. And Had a question here about yellow perch, fishing for yellow perch. Again, something very small like this is something that you can use for any of the panfish species like that. And with that, I believe we'll move into basic equipment. With Amber and Barb.
But just a reminder, we will be going into more depth about those next week and for this week, we're just going to cover the basics for panfish. So when it comes to basic ice fishing equipment, you can easily spend lots of money to make the sport easier and more comfortable. However, you don't necessarily have to spend that much money just to catch a fish. The items listed on this page are all you really need for that basic ice fishing equipment. As long as you know someone with an ice auger who can drill holes, otherwise you can buy your own, which we will talk about in the next slide. So having the right equipment can really make a difference when it comes to ice fishing. The sport requires very little equipment, which can be obtained relatively inexpensively, or it can be made from home. So here are a few items that we suggest you bring along with you. The first one is pretty obvious. You're going to want to get a fishing license. Of course, anytime you go fishing, no matter what season it is, you will want to get your fishing license. You can do that either online on the Iowa DNR website or at most outdoor recreation stores like Bass Pro, Sportsman's, Fleet Farm, any of your local bait shops. You can even get them at Walmart. So you will also want to bring some snacks and hot liquids. So you will want to pack some high energy snacks like trail mix, granola bars, fruits and veggies, jerky, anything that will keep you going for a while. It's also a good idea to pack the thermos of hot liquids like cocoa, sweet tea, hot fruit juices, hot soup, all that good stuff. That will definitely keep you going on a cold day, and it could potentially prevent hypothermia as well. Next, you'll want to bring some hand and feet warmers. I highly recommend bringing those. Your hands and feet are usually the first to get cold, and having these along will provide extra warmth and keep you toasty, which can make your trip longer and make it more enjoyable overall. Next, obviously you want to bring a basic ice fishing rod and reel. You'll definitely want some kind of fishing pole. These can be simple homemade items like a pop bottle rig, which you can see in that picture that I have. Pop bottle rigs are great for beginners because they're a simple, affordable, like DIY alternative to a store-bought rig. All you need is an empty pop bottle, fishing line, and your tackle. There are a lot of great tutorial videos online that you can watch to figure out how to fish with them, even how to make them if you're not sure. But then the advantage to a store-bought rig is that it will allow you to like play with the fish more, allows you to change your fishing depth quicker. You can use a regular fishing rod for ice fishing, but it's not ideal. Ice fishing poles are specifically designed for the small fishing holes and are typically much shorter. They range sizes 24 to 36 inches. They come in all different styles, lengths, and actions to match different types of lures, baits, and different species you target. Also, side note, just a reminder, as well as summer angling, only 2 poles per licensed angler may be in action at the same time. Not sure if they covered that earlier, but no more than 2 per person, and a pop bottle rig is also considered a rig, so that would be included in that. As far as fishing line goes, most anglers choose a 2 to 4 pound test transparent monofilament line. Monofilament line is more durable in the cold, and the 2 to 4 pound test line is tough but limp enough to feel the tension on the line whenever you get a bite. Next, so we're going to talk about small hooks and lures. Again, like I said before, this is for basic ice fishing. We will go into lures and more specifics next week. So if you have questions, just tune in next week. You can purchase all different kinds of lures, tackle for ice fishing. We will go into more depth next week, but for basic ice fishing, all you really need is a small hook, sizes number 8 through number 10. A lot of hooks come with a brightly colored jig head to attract the fish's attention in low light conditions. Ice fishing involves a lot of jigging or vertical fishing. That's when you go up and down, kind of like a yo-yo. That's gonna definitely help you attract a fish. So you really don't need any fancy lures for basic ice fishing. You just gotta keep it simple, and it's definitely cheaper that way too. Bobbers help detect when a fish is biting. So for ice fishing, you're gonna want a small dime size, either foam or sponge. I've seen like balsa wood. I think that the sponge or foam works best because they won't freeze or crack as easily. If you don't have a bobber, you can simply curl the line around your finger and jig that way. That way you'll be able to detect the fish biting because it'll move your finger a little bit. As far as bait, you should pick out a bait based on your desired species of fish to catch. For basic ice fishing, you'll most likely be going after panfish, such as bluegill, crappie, and maybe some largemouth bass too. For these species, we recommend wax worms, which are really small little white worms, mealworms, or small minnows even. You can also buy red wigglers or earthworms as long as you kind of section them up a little bit before you use them. The smaller bite-sized pieces will be more intriguing to fish, and it'll be easier for you to catch fish that way. So if we go to the next slide. So the previous slide, like I said, had all the necessities for basic ice fishing. This side includes more additional basic equipment. These tools you can use to improve your experience, tools that we've definitely noticed that help us out. First of all, ice auger or spud bar. Like I said before, it's a good idea to know somebody who has one because they can be kind of expensive. An ice auger is a tool used to drill a hole in the ice. They can come either powered by hand, gas, or electric. Our augers can easily be the most expensive tool required for ice fishing, so definitely find somebody who has one, or you can, if you'd like to purchase one on your own, you might want to stick to a smaller size, like 4 to 6 inch blades. That'll help you to make smaller holes for the basic fishing. The smaller augers are also a lot easier to use and are cheaper to purchase, so definitely recommend those. If you don't want to get an auger, you can opt to get a solid steel spud bar or ice chisel. It's a 4 to 5 foot long piece of steel, and it's tapered at one end. These multi-purpose tools can add stability when you're walking across the ice. You can test the ice before you step, and they can also be used to chip off ice to make fishing holes. So it's kind of like an ice auger, but it's a lot more affordable. They're relatively inexpensive. You can invest in one for $10 to $40, depending on what style you get. A depth finder, I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but I'm gonna go more in depth. No pun intended. Okay, depth finders are nice because they help you find the bottom of the water. And they also allow you to jig up and down the water column to figure out, or to help you find the depth, so then you can then jig after that. You can purchase high-tech digital ones. I know a lot of people have those ones. We'll talk about that more next week. We'll go more in depth. But these ones that I have a picture of are like $3. They're just the weighted depth finder. I think this is a better option for beginner anglers. We will have a tutorial video on the next slide on how to use them. Ice skimmers or strainers can be used to clear the fishing hole of any ice chips or debris. This will allow you to get your bait or lure down the hole and will keep the hole from quickly freezing back over. It can also be a good tool for a task to give to a younger kid who may not be as interested in fishing. A 5-gallon bucket. A 5-gallon bucket can be very versatile. It works nicely as a gear carrier. You can turn it upside down and make a nice seat. It will also work to carry all your stuff or to carry a fish if you catch any fish. And then also in emergencies, you can turn it and it'll hold air and use that as a flotation device. Needle nose pliers or knife. It's a good idea to include these to remove any hooks or cut line if you catch a fish or you want to release a fish. A tape measure ruler you can also bring along to measure the length limit if you have a species of fish that have a length limit. And lantern or flashlight is a good idea. It's a must-have if you are going to be on the ice after dark. It's just a safety thing. So definitely include that if you're going to be out late. Yeah, so the more you practice ice fishing, the more you will understand which equipment works best for you and what you might need to improve your sport. The best ways to increase your odds of catching fish are obviously going to be through practice and just a lot of testing. But I'm going to send it over now to Scott, Pat, and Tyler for basic fishing tactics.
All right, so it's just some more basic things that we'll go over here. The first one we've got listed there is drilling a hole to find fish. And so there's a few things I want you to keep in mind when you're out there with your ice auger. The first thing is making sure that you're aware where your feet are in relation to where the blades are. And Pat may be able to speak on this. I'm sure he's probably seen some of these accidents, but those blades are sharp and they're spinning fast, especially if you're using a hand drill or a gas or electric powered auger. And so make sure that you have your feet a safe distance away from that auger in case it starts to skip a little bit on top of the ice, because you definitely don't want to slice your foot open before you even get started fishing. So keep that in mind as you're doing that. Drilling holes to find fish. That's one tactic to use. Again, I mentioned before, when you're ice fishing, you can be mobile. And so this is one way you can drill multiple holes in various locations. You can check the depth. If you drill your first hole and it's a foot deep and drill your next hole and it's 10 foot deep, you know that you're right there kind of on a drop off, which is a good place to be fishing. And so that's one way to figure out what all the depths are going to be, is to drill a variety of holes. So where will the fish be? Well, again, they're going to be near the bottom and in those deeper areas, but also just like in summertime, along any drop offs, any structure, or along weed lines. I'll let Scott come on here. We've talked a little bit about fishing for bluegill and panfish and those sorts of things. But we've had a few questions come up about maybe fishing for some bigger fish, and we will touch on more predator fish next week. But tip ups is a common tactic people use, especially on the larger lakes, to target things like muskies and northerns. And so I'll let Scott take that here.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. And there's a couple questions also about using bobbers and jigging. You can lift up that bobber off the surface, jig your jig, and then set it back down if you're pan fishing, and that's the way you would jig with the bobber attached to the line. Pat mentioned, and Tyler as well, tip-ups. Tip-ups are a device that contains everything that you'd have in a rod and reel, except it sets independent of you, has a flag that can be tipped over. When the fish starts to pull on the line, the flag goes up. So you can set that maybe 100 feet, 200 feet away from you in a different area. And then when the flag goes up, that indicates you've had a strike, and then you go over to that device and try to catch it. It would definitely be more for predator type fish, walleye, northern pike. Not that you can't catch panfish on tip-ups, but I think you're much better off with the smaller ice jigs and ice rods. They are, and we'll get into it more next week, they are making some devices where you can make your individual fishing rod into a tip-up. So that's kind of some new technology in ice fishing, but again, a little more advanced technique. And to answer some of the questions that have come in too, you can catch any fish that you'd catch in the open water hook and line through the ice. It's just how you adapt your tactics and the water body you choose and the location within that water body to really catch anything. Obviously, something that people may fish for in the open water, like a carp with dough balls, you're going to have a hard time catching through the ice. But most of the game fish species that we see anglers target in the summer, you can catch through the ice. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Scott. And Scott and I, we were just talking last week. I think we got sent a picture of a guy that caught a muskie through the ice. So it definitely can be done. I'm going to go ahead and have Amber or Barb click on this video here. It's a demonstration video about essentially locating the bottom and setting your line at certain depths.
Okay, give me a second, folks, because we've had some glitches with trying to run them from the presentation. So there's going to be some glitches in me getting to the video. So just give me a second.
No problem.
I'll stop.
Expand it.
Problem is my thing's in the middle.
Rewind it.
Sorry, guys. I have bars in my way. We're going to start. Okay, can y'all hear the video?
No, Barb.
Okay, that's why I was afraid of. It didn't give me my option. So we're going to stop.
Barb,
Sorry, guys.
if you just want to play the video, I can kind of walk through it if you want.
Let's just do that. Because it didn't pop my option to share my audio.
All right, so we've got those depth finder weights that with the clamp on it that I showed earlier. So you can clamp that right on the hook. And then using a bobber, similar to this one, or you can use a foam bobber. That's another way that you can suspend your bait as well. And so they're dropping that sinker down into the water. It's going to hit the bottom. And you see they've got the line clasped with their fingers. And so when it hits, they can get that line marked. And there's a couple ways that you can do that. You can put, I've seen people use tape, but also something like a bobber stop that you can put on there, and you can mark that line with it. Or she's using a slip bobber there, and so she was able to keep a hold of that bobber and put the pin in it at that certain depth. And so once it hits the bottom, you may want to pull it up a foot or two to start, and then mark the line there with the bobber. And so we got the bait, got the worm swimming around. Here comes the bluegill. You're about to be a very successful angler. And so that's how you can set the depth on that. Especially if you're going to be bobber fishing. Otherwise, even those bobber stops, I use those. If I don't have a depth finder with me, I'll use these bobber stops. It's just a piece of string. You thread it on there, you pull it tight, it's a knot. And I just kind of keep that on my line. And so once I find the bottom, I can set that depth and use that kind of as a marker. Even if I'm not using a bobber, I can use that as a marker right at the water level. And so that's one way that you can set that depth. Something important, as Pat talked about, go out with somebody else and have fun. But while you're out there, try different jigs. Everybody try on a different color, try on a different lure, and fish at different depths. And so maybe have somebody fishing right on the bottom, maybe somebody in the middle of the water column, and somebody right there in between. Doing that gives you multiple options to find potentially where those fish are, what depth they're at, and maybe what lure they're looking for, what kind of bait they're looking for. And so that's one way to kind of narrow down where those fish are, especially if you're with a group of folks. And so I had somebody ask if they could see the clamp weight again. And here's the one I have. And it's got these clamps on it. And it will just clamp right on this jig. And so, and it'll stay on there too. I have yet to lose one of these, dropping it down the hole. So again, that's one of those depth finder weights, very common ice fishing tool. You know, probably anybody that sells ice fishing equipment is going to have those sorts of things readily available for you. As far as again, jigging with a bobber, I mean, you can do it. You know, it's really one way to just kind of figure out what those fish are interested in. So if you're just letting it sit there, you're not having any bites, you know, giving some action and some motion to it. If that triggers a bite, then you know that's what those fish are looking for. Scott or Pat, did you have anything else to add to that?
I don't, Tyler.
Another good thing is maybe if you're using 2 fishing poles, be very aggressive and actively jig one and leave the other stationary and not move it as much. That way, if one technique starts working, it kind of clues you into how the fish are reacting to your bait. So if the slower technique's working, you can put a second line down with that same setup, or just slow your jigging down and hold it just still if that's the way the fish want the bait.
Yeah, that's great advice. My dog thought that was great advice too, Scott. We move on to the next slide is choosing a location. And trying to bring the slide up here. We did have a question about beginner tips. Again, tonight is going to be recorded, and that will be posted. I believe a link has been put in the chat. So this is something that you can watch later on, especially if you weren't on for the beginning. And if you have any questions, specific questions for us, again, feel free to put those in the chat or the Q&A, I guess, and we'll try to get those answered either live or we'll type you a response. As we move to choosing a location, how do you find a local pond or lake to fish at? But the good news is on the DNR's website, there is lots and lots of information for you to look at. From a lake's perspective, you've got the DNR Fishing Atlas. That is one that, you know, if you want to go fish, especially our larger lakes, for example, if you want to go fish Clear Lake, you can zoom in on Clear Lake. You can make it so it's got your location on it, and you are out there on the ice. And the fishing atlas and the hunting atlas, for that matter, are going to show you where those public locations are at. From an urban standpoint, we've got the Fish Local map, and so that's on the Fish Local page. And that's going to have ones that are in a lot of the cities in the state. We haven't gotten them all on there yet, but that's going to have locations that we've identified that have a fish population. They're publicly access, or they're provide public access. Most of them, probably 90% of them, are city owned. Some of them are county owned. And I see there's some links going up there in the chat for you to check out for the Fishing Atlas, and we'll get the Fish Local one on there. I did have a question earlier about ice fishing on the Fish Local map. And so one thing we're trying to do is get locations on there where you're allowed to get information on there about locations you're allowed to ice fish. And so many cities have ordinances that prohibit winter recreation on their ponds. So whether that's ice fishing, ice skating, hockey, whatever it is on the ice, you name it. And so some cities do need to pay attention where you are at, because the city you are in right now may allow it, but the next one over may not. And so on that map, we've tried to identify ones that have specific ordinances that permit ice fishing, and so that they allow it, and then ones that have ordinances prohibiting ice fishing or don't allow it, we've got those marked as well. Some of those aren't going to have any notification on them at all. And that just means either we haven't been in touch with them about ice fishing specifically yet, or they currently don't really have any rules for or against it. And so that's something that we're continually working through to try to get that map updated. That map's only a couple of years old now, so we've got a lot of information to add on there. But if you're in the Des Moines metro, for the most part, those ponds are updated. My contact information is on the website, and so if you do have a question about a specific water body, I can try to point you in the right direction. Feel free to call me or send me an email. As far as farm ponds go, private farm ponds, I guess I'll say it that way, those are private property. And so if you're going to be fishing one of those, make sure that you have permission to be out there. And so make sure that you're not trespassing, and take caution when you're choosing a location. You know, as Pat mentioned, I can't explain that enough. Like Pat mentioned earlier, make sure you are paying attention to what the ice looks like. Make sure that you know where you're at. If you're by yourself, make sure somebody else knows where you're at, because we don't want to have anything happen. So keep those things in mind. Check the ice often. Ice can change pretty dramatically depth-wise. So make sure that you're paying attention to that, and just go out and have some fun. But those resources are available to you on the DNR website for you to find places to go. And Scott, do you have anything to add to that?
You know, like Pat mentioned with ethics too, you know, for beginning ice fishermen, a lot of times, you know, you can get a starting point, you know, looking at a public lake and seeing where the other fishermen are, but do use caution. There's a little bit of a buffer zone. We don't necessarily need to you know, join them for their noon meal, but you know, look at areas other anglers are fishing. There's a lot of habitat with that similar depth and that in the close proximity, so that can help a beginner. Try as many spots as possible. Don't get pretty frustrated if you go to the first spot and you don't get any bites, especially if you're fishing a small pond, an urban pond. Move around a little bit. It's a little extra effort to drill that second, third, fourth, fifth hole. But a lot of times that's the difference between a successful trip and an unsuccessful trip is try different depths, try different habitat. If you can see where there's some brush piles or that, you know, the fish might be related to that structure. Certain panfish, especially bluegill and crappie, like to be near woody structure if it's in a lake or a pond. You can't always see that below the ice, but you know, maybe fishing activity or someone you're fishing with may have knowledge of where some of that structure is in a water body.
I'll add to Scott's tips there, if you don't mind. Like Scott said, move around a lot if you can. Don't always stay in one spot. If you can, drill several holes and move. Fish sometimes like to bite early in the morning and then right at sunset. Not all the time do they like to bite throughout the day. So if you might have your most active fishing in the morning and then towards evening. However, there are days where fish will bite all day. Again, around structure, see where other people are fishing, see where other people have drilled holes. Maybe in the open water season, when you're in a boat and you can mark some of those locations where there's habitat, brush piles, mark those with a GPS, and then you can go back later on ice and find those locations with a GPS.
Yeah, great information. And a lot of those depth maps on the website are going to have some of that location marked for you already, depending on the water body. We got a few questions here in the Q&A. I'll run through here quick. One question: how do you get neutral or negative fish to bite after you've brought them in? You know, some of that is just using some different tactics. You know, if you are jigging very heavily and they leave on you, try just letting it sit, or try being kind of sporadic about it, about your presentation for it. And so that's one way to try to entice those fish to bite. Some of it could just be, they'd rather have a minnow than a wax worm or something like that. So that's one tactic you can use. Do you use any weights with the small baits for bluegills? No. This is going to be just fine. It'll get down the hole just fine. Unlike open water, you're not dealing with wind and wave action and stuff like that right at the water surface. Of course, you may be sitting in the wind, but right at the water surface, you're not your jig's not going to drift away on you like that. So you're straight down vertical jigging, and these small jigs will do the job for you without an additional split shot or other sinker. How long should you give a spot before moving? That's a good question. I don't typically kind of like and yes, that is a tungsten jig. Kind of like Scott and Pat both mentioned, I don't typically stay in one spot very long, especially if I've had 0 bites. I may just give it, 10, 15 minutes, and I'm drilling a hole somewhere else until I can find those fish, especially if I'm on a pond. If you're on a 1 or 2 acre farm pond or something like that, it shouldn't take you too long to at least locate the fish. Catching them may be another story, but locating them is something that can be done fairly quickly. Had another question pop up here. Okay, as far as the urban stuff goes, a lot of cities do allow ice fishing. Ankeny is one that does currently allow ice fishing, and so that's one that fishing's pretty hot there right now.
Tyler, I think you've mentioned it some various different ways, but one of the things that we want to note that and whenever you're ice fishing, they're either there or they're not, because they tend to be schooled up more so than maybe with some summer fishing. So if you're catching fish, stay at that hole. If you're not catching fish, move. And you already mentioned moving quickly, and especially on a small body of water. And we've had a lot of things about structure. If you fish a body of water during the summertime, if there's places where you got hung up on hooks and things, that's where you might want to try ice fishing if you're looking for structure, as long as it has adequate depth. And in farm ponds, if you're only in 3 or 4 feet of water, you're probably not going to be on fish. You need to get out. And like we were just out last weekend, and pretty much we drilled holes until we found, where it was deep enough where we thought we'd find fish, and there's, where we knew that there was vegetation. Just a thing I wanted to toss in there.
Yeah, great point, Barb. Species, especially like bluegill or yellow bass, even, they're going to be schooled up a lot of times. I've noticed on some of the small farm ponds that I fish, I may not see anything on my depth finder, and then I'll drill a hole and the whole depth finder is lit up with fish. And, they're all schooled up in one spot. I know on Clear Lake and the natural lakes, a lot of folks chase around the schools of the yellow bass. And so, yeah, that's one thing to take into account as well, is those fish are going to be schooled up a lot this time of year. We got a question here about, if you don't know anyone with an auger, how easy is it to make a hole with a spud bar? And that can be pretty hard to do. One thing I will say is I have twice now in the last 2 years, forgotten my auger as I've gone out ice fishing. And I haven't had an issue with asking somebody to drill a hole for me, believe it or not. And I don't know how I forgot my ice auger, but I guess it does happen. But a lot of times there's a lot of groups out there, ice fishing clubs and groups. Reaching out to a few of those members. Some of them may let you borrow those your ice auger, or any of the marketplaces or anything like that. You may be able to find one for fairly cheap as well. So that's a couple options for you. Making a hole with a spud bar, I've never done that, but I don't expect that to be a very easy job by any means.
The spud bar can work in a small hatchet, but if you get to very thick ice, you're gonna have a very difficult time. Right now, even in northern Iowa, we're looking at 6 to 8 inches of ice, and you could definitely probably spud a hole or take a small wood hatchet and create a hole to fish through. But on a typical winter on Clear Lake, for example, we'll see 20, 22 inches of ice, and you're not going to get a hole through that thickness of ice very easy.
Yes, great point, Scott.
We'll just have them come back to Central Iowa. We don't get that deep down here. And what's the other thing is hand auger. You mentioned marketplace. One of the things, if you do get one of those, make sure you invest in some blades or get them sharpened, because if you go out on the ice with dull blades, you're not going to enjoy yourself very much at all. And smaller blades, we were talking about this the other day when we were prepping for this. You don't need more than a 6-inch auger. An 8-inch hand auger would kill you. Even an 8-inch gas auger, I mean, that's a big hole. And Scott said, and Scott fishes more than any of us on the ice, I believe. I probably say categorically. And he said he's never found a fish he can't catch through a 6-inch hole on the ice. So I'll go with that.
Yeah, and to kind of go off that, Barb, if you do, get into ice fishing and invest in that ice auger, they come with a guard to guard those sharp knife blades that help shave through that ice. Very important to keep that cover on for a couple different reasons. One, they're a safety hazard for you or whoever's fishing with you. But if you don't leave that cover on and you just nick it, putting it into the trunk of your car, maybe up against the bed of your pickup, those sharp blades get just one little imperfection in there and you're going to struggle drilling those holes from that point on. So a couple good reasons. If you get to the point to invest in that auger, if you don't have one, keep that safety guard on at all times except when drilling that hole.
Okay, Tyler, did you have anything else you wanted to add in there? Because one of the things when we talked the other day that Dale mentioned that we might have some folks who were interested in cleaning their catch. And so we do have a video, and I'm doing a different option this time. I've closed down some windows so I can go directly to the video because it wasn't letting me out of my window before. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, definitely. Let's move on to the fish cleaning video.
Okay, we're gonna go straight to YouTube. And I want to. And so.
To clean fish, you need a sharp fillet knife that has a thin, flexible blade. Latex dip gloves make it easier to handle the fish. And you need cold water for fillets and supplies to clean up and dispose of your garbage. So let's get started. Cut behind the pectoral fin from the top of the fish to the belly. Cut down to and stop at the backbone. On smaller fish,
We'll start. There. We have it yet. This is why we didn't want to go full screen. I'm totally. Oops. Oh, let me have to. Yep. Okay, folks, we're having some video issues, so I think that Megan's going to try it from her end. Okay, Megan, were you able to run the video from your end? Because we locked up over here.
To clean fish, you need a sharp fillet knife that has a thin, flexible blade. Latex dip gloves make it easier to handle the fish. And you need cold water for the fillets and supplies to clean up and dispose of your garbage. So let's get started. Cut behind the pectoral fin from the top of the fish to the belly. Cut down to and stop at the backbone. On smaller fish, this is a straight cut, but because this is a larger bluegill, there is a significant chunk of meat along the backbone in front of the pectoral fin. Flip the fish and cut along the backbone down to the ribs. Keep your knife flat against the spine. Be sure to hold the fish so that you are cutting under your hand and not toward it. Once you are past the ribs, insert the knife through the fish and continue cutting along the spine to the tail fin. Pull the front part of the fillet away from the backbone and shave the meat off the ribs. Note that there are spines that come off the ribs about the middle of the fish. You can cut around them or cut them out of the fillet when you are finished. Separate the fillet from the belly. Flip the fillet out and place the knife flat against the skin, next to the tail fin. Run the knife blade along the skin to separate the fillet. Keep the blade flat and slightly angled toward the skin to make sure you get all the meat. Check the fillet for bones from the small spines that come off the ribs. Flip the fish and repeat the process. Note that sometimes the second side is a little more difficult. On this side, I cut from the belly to the back, but do whatever works for you, so long as you don't cut toward your other hand. Cut along the backbone just to the top of the ribs until you get past them. Then push the knife blade through to the belly and cut along the backbone to the tail fin. Shave the meat off the ribs. You can cut through them and then remove, but I find that messier and you have to take them out anyway, so I just go around the ribs. Separate the fillet from the belly. Cut the meat off the skin. Check the fillet for spines from the ribs. And this fillet has some, so I'm going to make a short cut on either side and remove that small piece of meat with the bones in it. Once you're finished, rinse the fillets and place in the refrigerator in cold water for a few hours. Drain them and the fillets are ready to cook or freeze. Bluegill are a milder tasting fish, so you can prepare it just as you would cod, pollock, etc.
Okay, I was trying to unmute and my computer was fighting me. These videos will be, they are available, and I'm going to do a screen share again. And we're going to go look at the website for this. And there we go. And this is the First Catch Center website. This is what Amber mentioned that we have been working on, and it's firstcatchcenteriowa.com. And it has a lot of information about very basic fishing things. It has a lot of tutorials. The videos that we showed you, the one on finding depth is not yet on here, but we can get it on there, as well as the one that is on cleaning fish is already on here under several tutorials and guides. And this is actually an ice fishing section, Ice Fishing 101. And it has a lot of information that we talked about tonight. And it has a more written information where you can go back and review a lot of things that we covered in this webinar. So Amber has put all of this together and you have access to all of that. And we want to share that. And there's also some events on there. We're not doing a lot of face-to-face events, but we are going to try some things the 24th, correct?
Yep.
The 24th of January, when we talk about one of the most difficult things to try ice fishing is, first of all, drilling holes. And if folks aren't out there that you can ask to drill holes and you've never done it before and you don't have an ice auger, they are going to drill some holes here that are going to be socially distanced. And we have some very basic kits. If you bring along a pop bottle, you can actually make your own rig. And we have one of those tiny little weighted depth finders, as well as we'll also have line, and we have some made bobbers because the sponge bobbers were really expensive. So we got a hack there where we made some out of pool noodles, which will work. And you can just make a rig and you can try it out. You need to register through Johnston. We can send out information after the webinar that will include the link if you're interested in that. It will be limited, the number of families that can come out, and we'll give you a kit per family. If you're in Central Iowa, that will work for you. If you're not, we can share with you how we made the kits and get that information out to you. And I think that is everything that I have, Jamie. So if you have other things that you need to share here at the end.
Say, hey, Barb.
Yeah, Megan.
We had some questions on when it was, or when is that event going to be?
It's going to be the 24th of January, and it'll be a 2-hour event, and there will be limited access. If it works out, they may try some more, but Amber and Nate are going to do that here on the 24th. So, and like I said, if you're not close by, I know everybody's not from Central Iowa, we can definitely send you how we put those kits together. So, you know, the easiest and cheapest way to get started ice fishing with really basic equipment, or maybe a couple hacks. We won't have augers, but like Tyler said, if there's folks out ice fishing, usually you can get somebody to drill you a hole if you look pathetic. It works for me.
Thanks, Barb. Yeah, so just a quick question about that class again, Barb. Where can people find out more information on that or get signed up?
There is a link on the First Catch Center. There is a calendar of events, and there's a link directly from there. It's being run through the city of Johnston. And this is sort of our pilot test to see if we can do something like this and still make it accessible to people during these weird times.
Yep, excellent. Thank you. That's fantastic. I know one of our local county conservation boards are doing a ice fishing basics as well. So that's also a good resource to be watching out for. If you can't make the one nearby here in Central Iowa, be on the lookout for opportunities close to you by checking out your local county conservation board. I know I learned a lot tonight. Lots of good questions and dialogue and feedback coming in from all of you all. We're grateful for the time that you all set aside to join us. As we wrap up here, there's just a couple of out the door reminders that we'd like to get into your ears so you can be thinking about. Next week on the 19th, we have the advanced version of this. It's going to go into more detail on some of the topics that were discussed tonight. We're going to talk about different species, more aggressive tactics. And so if tonight's class didn't relieve the itch for ice fishing, be sure to turn in next week and join us. You can find out more information on our website, Iowa DNR, and follow the links on Facebook that led you to this class. We will, in the coming weeks, be sending out a follow-up email. It'll be our hope to try to get that out within a week or two at the latest with all the information that we kind of covered tonight. It'll have a link to our YouTube channel where this was recorded and streamed live. So you can go back and watch it repeatedly if you'd like. There's going to be surveys. We want to make sure that you all take time to answer questions for us so that we can learn how to improve these courses. Tonight was our biggest audience ever. And so we want to make sure that we're continuing to provide a quality service to you all. So make sure you take time to fill out our post-event survey that will be hitting your email inboxes again here in the coming weeks. Also on that email, there's going to be a lot of resources, links, information, the kit that Barb just mentioned about how to get going with ice fishing. We're going to try to fill that email with as much information as you can stand so that you have a great chance of getting out there and trying ice fishing. Also, be on the lookout for more events coming your way. We're going to continue to deliver events and programs just like this virtually. We've had great responses. I know coming up, I'm just beginning to nail down some dates for a shed hunting class that'll be coming up sometime in early February. So if you're interested in learning how to hunt deer antlers after they fall off of the deer, be sure to be watching our Facebook page and our website for that information, as well as other classes on cooking, bird watching, programs called She Goes Outdoors. There's so much to be found on the Iowa DNR website. Make sure you take time to spend some time looking for that. We want you to be part of these and be part of our learning family. So with that said, again, big thanks tonight to our tech team, Megan and Nicole. Thanks for bringing the questions to our attention. Thanks to our panelists who answered questions, not just on screen, but off screen as well. Hopefully, this was time well spent. I know it was for me, and good luck. Be safe out there on the water, and we will see you next time. Have a good night, everybody.